Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And today we're going to be checking out parts 2 and 3 of Frederick the Great from Extra History. So far, I've really liked this series. I mean, it's always fun. They're informal. They're super quick videos. So, hey, why not? It's good to get into a topic where you just sort of want the surface level understanding of him. And of Frederick the Great, that's really all I have. Because as I said in the first video, I used to play him all the time in AoE3. And I'm glad to know that there's some fellow AoE3 fans out there. And I'm curious what he gets up to now. So now he's a young man. He's probably, if not in command, then maybe a captain or a lieutenant or something along these lines. And yeah, let's see what Frederick gets up to in these next 2 episodes. If you haven't already yet, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it.
The Rhine, April 1734. It's the War of Polish Succession, and Frederick, Crown Prince of Prussia, is trying to be the man his father wants him to be. Though court-martialed after his attempted escape to England, he's been restored to military rank in order to gain battlefield experience. But this is not how you run an army. Frederick is embedded with the forces of the Holy Roman Empire, confronting the French under the famed general, Prince Eugene of Savoy. Yet Eugene is a fated hero. He can pass wisdom and experience to Frederick, sure, but he's also 70, frail, and can barely remember his last conversation. He's cautious and defensive, afraid to act. His body was still there, Frederick later observed, but his soul had gone.
And I only know like surface level stuff about Prince Eugene of Savoy, but that is kind of a shame because I know that he is one of the all-time greatest generals, ranks up there with people like Napoleon. And I don't know too much about him personally, just sort of the brief understanding of him, but I know he took part in the Battle of Vienna. He was highly well respected. That's really about all that I know, though. And I think he's probably more of a not really forgotten figure in history, but compared to people like, Napoleon or other great generals, is not really as much spoken about, or even Frederick the Great himself, to be honest. But again, he didn't lead a nation into becoming a major power, right? So maybe that's why he's a little bit less known than our friend here, Frederick.
And the Imperial Army? Well, it was weak, disorganized, and fractious. I could defeat this enemy, Frederick muses. And he would get his chance. For this terrorized prince was about to start a fire that would burn through Europe and the world.
7 Years' War, right?
Say, would you happen to want to watch the next episode of this series immediately after watching this one instead of having to wait a full week? Well, now with the new Nebula First, you totally can. Learn how to get access through the Curiosity Stream Nebula bundle after the episode. At the end of last week's episode, Frederick decided to play the role of the dutiful son, and wait until his ill father died. He submitted to a new regime of tutors that focused on making him masculine, agreed to marry a woman he detested, and went to war. But a strange thing happened. Frederick actually became a pretty good soldier. As colonel of a regiment, he developed a fascination with strategy, battlefield tactics, and leadership. And while he never truly saw any action during the War of Polish Succession, he acquitted himself honorably. When he returned, his father, Frederick William, now confined to a wheelchair by gout, reconciled with his son. Proud of Frederick's progress, he gave him a lakeside castle, where he could indulge in artistic pursuits in private.
If only all our fathers could give us lakeside castles for, graduating university or going to college or whatever it is, right? Wouldn't it be nice? But I find it interesting that, I would sort of see Frederick as a character who's really interested in learning, right? As we learned in the last episode, his main interests are really in the arts and philosophy and in the study of really, what it is to be human, if you will, or the expression of humanism and the Enlightenment. But nonetheless, I have a feeling that these types of characters also could be very good generals because it takes amount of abstraction, it takes amount of strategy, it takes amount of understanding human behavior as well to be a good general. And so I think that's kind of makes sense that these characteristics would really flow into one another and you would become a good general.
Frederick and his wife, Elizabeth Christine, moved in, though in truth he largely kept clear of her. There, he read books, staged plays with friends, played the flute, set up a regular discussion group on military strategy, and recruited architects to expand his new home. It was the happiest time of his life, though he was clandestinely doing something else as well, preparing to become king. See, some of those architects started quietly taking trips on his dime, studying opera houses in Italy and France. He also immersed himself in philosophical writing, producing his first book, The Anti-Machiavel, an idealistic refutation of Machiavelli's The Prince. In the book, Frederick argues in favor of an enlightened absolutist monarch who would provide a moral example to his people and keep them healthy and happy. He then sent the manuscript to the French philosopher Voltaire, who edited it and prepared it for anonymous publication. Though his identity did leak immediately. It would have...
I kind of wonder if, like, maybe one of these days I should do sort of like just a brief series on the philosophers of history, right? And people that had a really, like, political philosophers, if you will. And Voltaire would be up there for number one. I mean, just... Can words even really put into, can words really describe how much of an impact Voltaire had? The idea of civil liberties, freedom of speech, being anti-authoritarianism, believing in the separation of church and state. I mean, Voltaire is such a huge figure, such an influential figure that arguably still has an influence on our modern times and on our modern political ideas. So maybe I'll do a video on that. Maybe I'll even do an original video on that one of these days about talking about these political philosophers and what effect they've had on today.
Eventually become a bestseller, with readers hoping to gain a window into...
Right, and by the way, like something like Kant would be up there as well, right? Kant, Voltaire, all the greats, really.
Frederick's mind. And perhaps the greatest insights could be found in a section on the type of wars he considered just. It contains some of the things you'd expect, such as defensive wars or wars of last resort, but also what Frederick called wars of interest.
Yes.
In such a war, a king realizes an enemy is going to declare war on him in the future and preemptively attacks them in order to gain the greatest military advantage. Was Frederick already considering the moves he'd make during his reign?
Sketchy ground, but okay.
It's possible. Though by this time, he had become adept at keeping people at a distance, hiding behind a series of masks and personas that sometimes contradicted one another. And more often than not, he adopted the part of a misanthropic loner. Some historians see this as a survival tactic, a response to trauma, and an attempt to hide his sexuality. But it did mean that even for close friends and ministers, it was really difficult to get inside Frederick's head. So it's hard to say exactly how Frederick felt in May of 1740, when he got word that his father was dying. Rushing to the palace in Berlin, they had time for one last talk. And it turned out that while opposite on all else, their political ambitions aligned. Both dreamed of uniting the scattered territories of Brandenburg, Prussia, currently sprinkled through the Holy Roman Empire or embedded with Poland, and both thought their kingdom could be one of the great nations of Europe. Then, on March 31st, 1740, Frederick William died in the arms of the son he'd tormented. But Frederick wasn't left alone. For now, he had the most efficient bureaucracy in Europe, an unmatched recruitment system, an army of 80,000, and an enormous war chest of funds, an amount his father had amassed by avoiding foreign wars. The Soldier King had, ironically, relied chiefly on clever diplomacy and never fully used the army he'd built. King Frederick the
Smarter way of going about it, really.
Second, however, would. But first, some fun. Frederick's immediate move after his father's death was to build an opera house. He wanted to invest in the arts and sciences, which, ironically enough, his father had defunded so badly that they actually had to borrow soloists from Saxony to sing at his funeral. Next up, no longer required.
That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing when you defund your art so badly that you have to borrow singers from the neighboring province to come sing at your own funeral. Wow, that's yikes. Can you imagine if at Queen Elizabeth's funeral they're like, yeah, we got no one, here's a German singer.
A wife to mollify his father, Frederick sent poor Elizabeth Christine to a palace outside Berlin. She wasn't even invited to his coronation. Instead, he brought an Italian philosopher who was likely his lover, and the pair followed it up with a foreign trip together where they met Voltaire. Then, with all of that out of the way, Frederick prepared for a war of interest. October 20th, 1740, Vienna. Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor and sovereign of the Habsburg dominions, is dead. All his life, Charles had been terrified that he would only have daughters, and because the laws of the Habsburg dominions said women could not inherit, his scattered territories would fragment in a succession crisis when he died. To prevent this, he'd issued the Pragmatic Sanction of 1713, declaring that a woman could inherit the Habsburg lands, and he spent most of his reign trying to get his neighbors to agree to it. Good thing, too, since his daughter Maria Theresa proved his most viable heir. Ironically, a woman Frederick tried to marry when he was searching for a bride. Now that'd be an alternate history novel worth reading. Charles had essentially bankrupted Austria in trying to bribe the great states into accepting the Pragmatic Sanction, a document they immediately backed off of as soon as he was dead. Austria's military was also weakened from a series of major wars, meaning the vultures were circling, seeing what they could pick off the Habsburg corpse.
Time for Prussia to get kicking right in there.
Of course, Austria also had something Frederick wanted. Silesia,
Yep.
a province that made up a third of Austrian revenue and sat right across the border from Brandenburg. But Frederick needed to make his move soon. Wait too long, and Saxony might take Silesia first, blocking Prussian expansion south. In 6 weeks, lightning speed in 18th century standards, Frederick had mobilized his army and crossed the border into Silesia. It was so easy at first, so much so that he could not have imagined that this act would set in motion a chain of events that would bring bloodshed not just to Central Europe, but to places as far away as Senegal,
Yep.
Brazil, India, and the Philippines.
And Canada as well, actually.
The First Silesian War and the War of Austrian Succession had begun.
Yep.
Prussian forces were practically unopposed, sweeping up the lightly defended province and taking forts. But Maria Theresa, who would become Frederick's lifelong rival, raised an army and began to oppose him. And so, Frederick II fought in his first battle. Molwitz, April
Cool.
10th, 1741. As the Austrian cavalry comes at his right flank, Frederick realizes his mistake. He'd tried to run this battle like an exercise, like he was drilling troops. When they'd come upon the Austrians, they could have simply charged into the smaller, unready army, but instead, he'd formed up, putting his grenadiers between his cavalry like the great Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus did in the 30 Years' War, a formation that would let the infantry murder cavalry with shots before his own mounted troops could countercharge. A battle.
I would love to see this actually laid out, though. Like, for example, Epic History TV does this the best, where you can see, and Kings and Generals too, actually, where you can actually see all the troop positions here. And it's like, I can't really visualize what this would look like, but I'm imagining something of, Napoleon portions here.
Plan out of a history book. It isn't working. Instead, the Austrian horse crashes into the right wing of his army and envelops it. His cavalry are standing still when the charge connects. The units mix in a battle of swords and pistols. And Frederick's in the thick of the fighting. It's confused and bloody. There's driving snow and fog. And both sides have white uniforms. The Prussian infantry
nice.
and artillery keeps firing into their own ranks, mistaking comrades for the enemy. And the Prussian cavalry are starting to rout. Gustavus Adolphus, he thinks. Oh God, this is how Gustavus Adolphus died. Mixed with the enemy, lost in fog. Suddenly, a man grabs his reins. It's his general. He tells Frederick to flee the field. The battle seems lost, and if he falls, Prussia will too, for he has no heir. So Frederick turns his great charger and bolts toward the nearest town.
Okay.
And he doesn't see that behind him, while his cavalry has broken, the well-drilled Prussian infantry starts to move across the field like solid walls, firing in steady volleys, driving
Fascinating.
off the Austrian cavalry attack. It is Frederick's first battle, and he's running away. But his infantry, the great gift from his father, will stand and fight.
Fascinating.
Oh man, Zoe, what a good...
Cool. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that at his first battle he ended up fleeing. But I mean, to be fair, when you have the king in the middle of the fog of war, as soon as he goes down, as he said, the state is going to fall. So let's keep going though. So that was number 2, the School of Battle. Let's have a look at number 3 here. All right, let's have a look here at part 3.
1741. It's the morning after the Battle of Molwitz. Frederick has had his first victory, and he's not happy about it. See, his general had told him to flee, that his army was about to be destroyed, so he had done so. Yet then that same general had turned the battle around and delivered victory. Meanwhile, Frederick had wandered in the dark, nearly being captured and hiding in a house until morning.
Nice.
He was embarrassed, but he had learned a great deal. Molwitz would be his school. Never again would he abdicate command to another or cut his losses when victory seemed possible. His cavalry had performed poorly, he needed to do something about that, but he also saw how his advancing infantry had terrified the enemy. Something to note there. And though improvements did need to be made, he had his victory. He had Silesia, and he would fight to keep it for 22 years. Thanks so much to Ren for being a simple and effective way to help make a difference in the climate crisis. Learn more after the
Man,
episode.
these sponsors are all over
Frederick's
the place.
invasion
You got Curiosity Stream, that makes sense. HelloFresh, and then Ren, which I've never heard of before.
of Silesia, on the thinnest pretenses and without even a formal declaration of war, catapulted him to international stardom. Across Europe, people scrambled to learn all they could about this rash and dynamic young king.
Yep.
How had a nothing power like Prussia, a scattershot part of the Holy Roman Empire, caught the mighty Habsburgs napping? Sales
I mean, again, like, is it really a nothing kingdom? I don't know. I don't really agree with the description of that. I mean, to say that Prussia is not a major power, yeah, for sure. But to say that it's a nothing kingdom, I don't know. I mean, it's not Ulm after all. That's an EU4 reference.
of his book, The Anti-Machiavel, shot up, and his correspondence
No, it's totally Voltaire.
with Voltaire, written on both sides with the intention that it be shared, circulated among philosophers. When Frederick had invaded, he told his ministers that he wanted to see his name in the gazettes, and boy did he get that. But in truth, this was not all about Frederick's enormous ego. It was also about putting Prussia on the map. When he came to the throne, Prussia was neither a fully independent kingdom nor a state in the Holy Roman Empire. It existed in the shadowland in between. The soil was sandy and poor, its territory separated, and the population only numbered 2.2 million, meaning forget a superpower like Habsburg Austria. Before the war, Prussia's biggest rival was neighboring Saxony. Yet by invading Silesia, he announced that Prussia was attempting to join the great nations of Europe. This wasn't some German state, this was a kingdom. But despite his
But it's not a kingdom. Right? So because it's still under the Holy Roman Empire, you can't have two kings in the Holy Roman Empire. So the first thing he's going to need to do is break away from that.
boldness crossing the border, when he entered Silesia, most of Europe assumed Austria would crush this upstart. But then Mollwitz proved them wrong and changed everything. It exposed Austria's weakness. And if you've ever watched any of our episodes on the Siege of Vienna, or Jewish pirates, or the 30 Years' War, you'd know that about 80% of Europe at this time was spoiling to take a swing at the Habsburgs.
Yep.
Many in Europe, including Frederick,
And this would not end anytime soon.
also fundamentally hated the idea of Maria Theresa, a woman heading one of the great powers. Not only did they not want her ruling Austria, they also wanted to break the tradition of the Habsburg line automatically being elected Holy Roman Emperor. Of course, in this case, a woman
And it would be much, much longer until that line eventually ended. But he tried.
couldn't legally be elected, but Maria was pushing for her husband's election. So, sensing weakness after Mollwitz, France, Spain, Bavaria, and Saxony pounced. And thus, the First Silesian War became merely a part of the much wider War of Austrian Succession. And if all of that sounds complicated, it's because it is. Sadly, we're going to have to gloss over a bunch of stuff since this is a series about Frederick and not
shame.
this unbelievably convoluted war where countries change sides faster than Loki's in the MCU. But basically what you need to know is that at Mollwitz, Frederick had rung the dinner bell. Habsburg's back on the menu, boys. Get a piece while it lasts. A coalition formed around Prussia, with the hope of carving up Habsburg lands in a partition. But Frederick worried that if that happened, these powers might get too powerful and overwhelm Prussia as well. So, Frederick's diplomats contacted their Austrian counterparts and cut a deal.
Clever,
They
right?
signed a secret truce so that both could recover strength, while their troops still pretended to be at war. This lasted for a few months until Frederick, worried Maria Theresa was coming back for Silesia, repudiated the treaty and joined the Allied campaign in Bohemia. But
And this is like the beautiful, what would you say, the sort of tricky nature of Prussia as it will go through time and we'll see throughout the series. But just switching sides, who cares, right? It's never about doing the right thing or morality or anything like this. It's pure politics. And he's willing, and Prussia's really willing, to switch sides on a dime to get what they want.
not long after Frederick arrived, the Allied march toward Vienna broke up. So turned out, it was Frederick's army that took the blow when Maria Theresa's brother-in-law, Charles of Lorraine, arrived with 30,000 troops to take the invaded territory back. And on May 17th, 1742, pursuing Austrians caught half of the Prussian army. Dug in around a village to meet the Austrian attack, they were instructed to hold until the king's part of the army could arrive and take direct command. Frederick was not about to let a mere general steal his thunder again, okay? But once he arrived, it was still a confused engagement. Frederick drove off the Austrian cavalry with a mounted charge backed by artillery, but it was a dry summer day, and soon, huge banks of dust obscured any vision of the battlefield. Central command broke down. Cavalry on both sides got lost, then quit the battle to pillage the enemy baggage trains. It then became a house-to-house brawl of infantry and artillery through the burning town that only ended when Frederick led a huge square of 24 battalions into the Austrian flank.
24.
Now, while technically a draw, the Austrians abandoned the field, giving Frederick the victory. Not to mention, diplomatically, he also won out. For when the British pushed both parties to the negotiating table, Frederick once again was allowed to keep almost all of Silesia. 2 months later, the First Silesian War was over. Yet he knew this was a temporary peace.
Yeah, key word here is first.
And that there was work to do. While the Prussian infantry was solid, the cavalry had performed poorly in both battles. So he went about restructuring and reforming his cavalry forces to be more disciplined and aggressive, so they'd serve him better when Maria Theresa came for her captured province. Oh, and she was going to. In fact, Maria Theresa had flipped the script. 2 years before, she'd been fighting alone against a major coalition, but now she'd set up a new anti-French alliance bankrolled by Britain. And with Russia and Saxony interested in joining, Frederick worried she was about to seek revenge.
I love this. It's just fantastic. Just, okay, now there's Sweden involved and it's being bankrolled by Britain because it wants to get back at the French, and Bavaria wants certain territory. And so they're going to join Prussia, but then what are the Austrians going to do? And it's fantastic. I love this stuff.
So then he built a rival alliance between Prussia, Bavaria, Sweden, and 2 German states, with the goal of restoring the Bavarian lands taken so far in the war. France also declared its support. Then, on August 15th, 1744, Frederick crossed back into Bohemia, launching the Second Silesian War, which went sideways almost immediately. The campaign depended on the French tying up Charles of Lorraine and his Austrians in the west, so he couldn't return to Bohemia. But that went out the window when King Louis XV fell ill leading the French army, and Charles disengaged. Then Saxony switched sides away from France and allied with Austria, meaning Prussia now had an enemy on its border. Meanwhile, Austrian guerrilla forces hounded Frederick out of Bohemia by just savaging his supply lines. And realizing this was unattainable, he pulled back to defend Silesia. Things got worse. Austria formed a new alliance with Britain, Saxony, and the Dutch Republic,
How many times have we heard in the past 3 minutes formed a new alliance?
with secret plans to partition Prussia the same way the powers had tried to carve up the Habsburg lands. Then Frederick's ally, the Holy Roman Emperor, dropped dead, and his son made peace with Austria, and finally in May, Charles of Lorraine crossed the giant mountains into Lower Silesia, leading a force of 60,000 Austrian and Hungarian troops, plus their Saxon allies. Frederick knew he had to act. Battle of Hohenfriedberg, June 4th, 1745, 7 a.m. Frederick told his troops to leave their campfires burning when they performed the night march. In darkness, they'd slipped out of camp and crowded across a bridge, right past the Austrian forces, for they were not the objective. Instead, Frederick wants to hit the Saxons first and destroy them before rolling up on the rest of the Austrian forces.
Interesting.
Oh, but they've been spotted. Shots ring out. Prussian and Saxon cavalry clash together in a vicious night battle. Pistol flashes light up gleaming sword blades. The Saxon camp begins to mobilize.
Can you imagine this? A battle like this with all these basically one-shot muskets in the middle of the night.
But the infantry pushes through, and the Saxon formations start to dissolve. By first light, the Saxon force is already routed, and Frederick's right turns to engage the main Austrian force. Hours of gunpowder and blood follow, and the next day, Frederick sits on his horse in the courtyard of the palace he's taken as his own. He has won his greatest victory to date, and now he is honoring the troops that, more than anything, made it possible. The Bayreuth Dragoons, his heavy cavalry. At the climax of the battle, when things had still hung in the balance, they had spotted a hole in the Austrian line. And by charging through that gap, they had overrun 20 enemy battalions and captured 2,500 prisoners. They'd broken the Austrians and only taken 94 casualties doing so.
What?
Now
That's crazy. Oh my god, that's Napoleon levels. They took 94 casualties and they took 2,500 prisoners of war. That's insane. I just wish I could see this visualized. Like, I love Epic History TV so much.
Parade their war trophies into the square. 67 battle flags of Austrian and Saxon units torn from enemy hands. There was still fighting to do, but when the king returned to Berlin, he would be doing so under a new name, Frederick the Great. And you know, actually, on that note of...
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you all very much for joining me on this one. Parts 4 and 5 will be coming up tomorrow. Let me know if you have any thoughts in the comment section down below, if you want to add anything to it. Again, didn't have too much to say here for part 3, but I love the alliance switching here back and forth. I think that's, I mean, it's kind of fun. I can't lie. So thank you very much for joining me. Take care. All the best. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.